All right, can you hear me?
Unclear.
Very good. Um, if we have Ms. Lewis on board, there we are. All right, in that event, I will call this meeting of the State Board of Elections to order. First item of business is I would request non-participants to mute their lines. In addition to Commissioner Piper today, we also have Carol Lewis of the Office of Attorney General on this in this meeting. I would request that the secretary call the roll to determine the quorum.
Chairman Brink,
Present.
Vice Chair Dr. O'Bannon,
Present.
Secretary LaCruz, present.
Very good. We have a quorum. All three members are here. Governor Northam has declared that a state of emergency exists in the Commonwealth as a result of the potential spread of COVID-19, a communicable disease of public health threat. This meeting is being conducted consistent with the requirements for electronic meetings by public bodies during a state of emergency set forth in items 4-0.01 of House Bills 29 and 30 as passed by the General Assembly and signed by the governor in April of 2020. The purpose of this meeting is to transact statutorily required business of the board. Consistent with COVID mitigation efforts, this meeting is being conducted electronically, and the opportunity for public comment will be provided electronically. The board will receive public comments on agenda items prior to its action on that item, and an open public comment period will be offered prior to adjournment. Individuals participating via video conference should signify their wish to speak through the conference's chat feature. After they have spoken, individuals participating by audio will have the opportunity to speak. I would ask for those who are participating by video conference that you would identify the agenda item or the open comment period during which you wish to speak. Without objection, each individual wishing to comment will be recognized for 3 minutes. Our first item of business is approval of the board's minutes from January 12, 2021. Secretary LaCruz.
Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second. It's been moved and seconded. Secretary LaCruz, will you call the roll, please?
Yes, for roll call vote, Chairman Brink,
Aye.
Vice Chair Dr. O'Bannon,
Aye.
Secretary LaCruz, aye.
The motion passes 3-0. The next item of business is the commissioner's report. Commissioner Piper.
Good afternoon, Chairman Brink and Vice Chair O'Bannon, Secretary LaCruz. Needless to say, even though we are past the November 2020 election, there is a lot going on here at the Department of Elections. I first want to start off by congratulating Secretary Brinley Johnson on her appointment as Secretary of Administration. She is replacing Secretary Kiana Connor, who has moved on. We're very excited. We've worked very closely with Secretary Johnson over the years, and we're really excited for her in her new role. And then we're also very excited, if you might have not already noticed, Deputy Commissioner Jessica Bowman is now Deputy Secretary of Administration, Jessica Bowman. So we're very excited for her. Congratulations to both of them. We're looking forward to working with them on all of our issues over the next the rest of the governor's term. I'm sure you all have been paying attention to the legislation going through the General Assembly. My understanding is that they're expected to gavel out this weekend. The only thing of note is the governor had proposed funding to replace Veris, and both versions of the budget include that funding. So it, assuming nothing changes between here and then, we anticipate to be releasing a request for proposal and moving forward on the replacement of our voter registration database here in Virginia. There's special elections happening around the Commonwealth all the time, as you're well aware. I wanted to highlight the Senate of Virginia 38th District. That will take place on March 23rd. Absentee voting is underway, and those localities are preparing for Election Day, but also fielding and receiving votes as we speak. Speaking of elections, today is the deadline to submit party primary declarations. So we will have the list of those offices where the parties have designated a primary. That, of course, does not necessarily mean that there will be a primary. It will require at least 2 candidates to qualify for the primary in order to hold a primary, but we'll know generally what localities will be handling primaries, or at least we'll know what we're looking for when it comes to the primaries. And we'll know more at the end of this month about where primaries will be held. And of course, that information will be updated on our website and communicated widely. Along those lines, the department and our good friend at the Attorney General's office, Carol Lewis, has been fielding a couple of lawsuits, I believe 3 now, regarding petition signatures. We'll talk about this in a little bit when we talk about the post-election report, but with the ongoing global pandemic, we've received a few lawsuits about how to safely gather petition signatures. We have entered into 2 consent decrees now, one for the statewide offices that allow for collection of electronic signatures for petitions. And then for the statewide offices, that has been reduced from the normal 10,000 signatures required to 2,000 signatures required. Another lawsuit for House of Delegates, and the Democrats running for House of Delegates allowed for the same electronic petition procedure to be implemented, and the court ordered that as well. That only affects Democratic candidates for the House of Delegates. So far we've seen some other lawsuits, or may see some potential lawsuits in that general direction going forward. As you all know, the board by legislation was expanded from 3 members to 5 members. We anticipate those nominations to come through soon, but I just wanted to make you aware that that will likely be happening, and we'll have a 5-member board at the next meeting. Also wanted to mention that a few weeks ago, we posted the position for the Director of Operations. The Director of Operations was a recommendation from JLARC in the 2018 report on the Department of Elections. And the General Assembly last year passed a requirement in the code that the department hire a Director of Operations. So that position was posted. It has since closed down, and we'll be setting up interviews for that position here soon, but I wanted to keep you aware of that. This position will allow for the directing of the day-to-day operational aspects of the agency. So looking forward to that, and hope to have them on board, if not by our next board meeting, the following meeting. I wanted to make you aware of some national federal work that's been done. The Election Assistance Commission on February 11th passed what's called the Voluntary Voting Systems Guidelines 2.0. This is an update to a longstanding certification platform for the federal government for voting systems. So the last time this was done was 2005, so it was long overdue. But as a result of the passage of VVSG, many vendors out there are assessing and reviewing the VVSG for updates to their voting systems. Of course, the National Information Security, and Technology, NIST, is what, and for whatever reason, I can't remember what that acronym stands for today. But NIST will be developing the testing standards. As a result of all of that, the certifications that you all passed last year, we had held off on really working through them. We had already set back a delay because of COVID. And so as a result of this change to VVSG, we are taking some time to review the VVSG and its impact on Virginia's standards and how it may impact the voting vendors out there, the voting systems vendors out there. I'll also allow more time for vendors to upgrade their systems and for us to get a better handle on costs that will be associated to those upgrades to the localities. So as a result, I think at the next board meeting, we'll be bringing some recommended changes to the certification program for your all's consideration. And likely that will include a delay to allow time for vendors and localities to assess and make changes that are necessary as a result of what's called VVSG 2.0. So I want to give you a heads up on that, and we'll be in touch at the board meeting to discuss that a little bit more in April. Also want to take a moment here at the top to talk about our very exciting statewide risk limiting audit that we kicked off recently. Wanted to let you know what we've been doing, what we are doing, and talk a little bit about what the risk limiting audit entails. So first of all, what has happened as we kicked it off on February 16th, we had a live kickoff, and then the recording is available on our YouTube site. This was just to set the ball rolling for the exciting audit that we're about to do, and talk about how it was going to work and start to answer some questions about how it worked for the registrars. Yesterday, we did what's called the dice roll, the random seed generation and ballot selection. So anyway, let's start back at the kickoff. At the kickoff, what we did was we started talking about how the audit is conducted. And one of the first things that has to be done is the localities have to go and assess their ballots and create what's called a ballot manifest. The ballot manifest is a list of all the ballots and where they're located. And so when we did the dice roll yesterday, the dice roll is 20 10-sided die, and we roll those dice to get a random number. That random number is entered into the audit software. The audit software then kicks out the random ballots that need to be pulled from the various localities. We did that yesterday. I had a lot of fun. I hope if you didn't get a chance to attend that you get a chance to watch the recording on our YouTube channel. It's a nifty little way to make this process a little bit more exciting, as it were. But that said, what ended up happening is the audit software kicked out that 1,372 ballots needed to be taken out. There were some localities that were not required to review any ballots. Those include Bath, Dickinson, Bath County, Dickinson County, Emporia City, Floyd County, Greenville County, Highland County, Lexington City, Lunenburg County, Prince Edward County, Radford City, and Richmond County. Every other locality in Virginia is required to participate in this audit this year. So what's happening? As of today, localities are scheduling public meetings. They're holding public meetings, and they have till Friday at 5 to complete their audit. So they pull the ballots that the audit software told them to pull. They will write down the results from the U.S. presidential and the U.S. Senate races. They will put that into the auditing platform, and then we'll be able to conduct the audit from there to determine if we've met our risk limit. The results of that will be announced on March 2nd. I believe it's at 11:30 a.m. and we'll have a live broadcast as well as a recording of that available to announce the results of the audit. And so that's just kind of what's happened so far. But I know there's been a lot of questions. This is a new process here in Virginia, and while it's not necessarily new because we've been doing it for a few years, it's new for a lot of people. And audits and post-election audits are still something that folks are trying to wrap their head around. So I'm going to take a few minutes to try and answer some of these questions that we've gotten, and I know that you all have heard as well. So what is a risk limiting audit? Well, first of all, in 2017, the General Assembly passed legislation requiring Virginia to conduct post-election audits. It took effect on July 1st, 2018, and we kicked it off with a post-election audit pilot in the city of Fairfax. Had a good experience there and worked with Verified Voting and a number of other groups on how to put together that audit. Since then, and especially in 2019, 35 localities participated in various audits. Obviously, in 2020, it was a little bit harder to conduct those, at least initially, and we, especially with all the things that were going on, did not conduct any audits in 2020. And so we knew that as soon as 2020, the election was over, that we needed to get back into on producing these audits. So why did we decide to do a statewide audit? Well, first of all, it's an opportune time. This is a lot of attention on this election, a lot of attention on audits and how they work. So we wanted the opportunity to really showcase how audits work in Virginia and refine and perfect the process. So it's an opportune time. We also had two statewide races in Virginia that were the results were a wide margin. And a wide margin is not important, but a wide margin allows for, well, let's go this way. The margin dictates how many ballots you're going to pull for your audit. And so the wider the margin, the less ballots that are needed to pull to meet the audit standard. The closer the election, the more ballots you would need to pull. I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute, but because of the wide margins in these two races, it allowed for all localities to participate without having to do a major lift or, we've all been, anyway, we wanted to make sure that they all participate in a way that did not take away from all the other work that they had to do at the time. And this was an opportunity for everybody to see the process, to be a part of it, to destigmatize it, and get comfortable with how an audit is supposed to work. So we chose this time to do this statewide audit, and so far things have been running really smoothly. I'm hearing a lot of positive responses from the localities on how the process is going and the information that they're gathering along the way. So what is an risk limiting audit? So what a risk limiting audit doesn't do is it's not really looking for discrepancies. Instead, it checks that the reported winner actually won, that the right person was elected, whether there were discrepancies or not. And that's why it's so important. You can trust that a risk limiting audit, whether you trust the tabulators or not, because a risk limiting audit is completely independent of the tabulators. An RLA answers the question, would this person have won if we hadn't used machines to count the votes at all? It's a quality assurance check on the overall result of the election, not any one ballot or any one voting machine. Auditing the actual machines would not provide the same reassurance. After all, a hacked machine on election day will still be hacked in the audit. The point is to review the ballots And that's why we have paper ballots. We can go back and review to ensure the outcome was correct. In a statewide RLA, every single ballot from every single scanner in every single locality has an equal chance of being selected for the audit. Every ballot is included in the statewide pool, talking about the statewide ballot manifest, from which ballots are selected, and they are not weighted in any way. So any one ballot has just as much a chance of being selected as any other. This is how the sample can be a valid representative sample of the whole state, even though not every locality may have ballots selected. Which ballots are selected for audit is deliberately not predetermined, but the proportion of ballots audited in any one locality will run roughly proportional to the locality's proportion of the votes cast in the audited election. This is how we know that because this election had a wide margin, the overall number of ballots needed for high confidence is very small. That it's likely some localities might not have any ballots selected, as we know, and that does not make the sample invalid. It's quite the opposite. If you were to sample the same number of ballots from each locality machine, it would skew the sample inappropriately, and you would no longer be able to use it to draw conclusions about the whole state. So we have a way of testing that every single scanner counted every single ballot correctly. It's called a full hand recount. An audit is not a recount, nor is it meant to be. The audit is meant to efficiently test that the ballot scanner's primary function to determine the winner of the election by tallying the votes was completed correctly. Concerns about how machines function on election day are handled prior to election day. This board, just last year, passed a regulation requiring that localities certify the testing of their machines to specific standards passed by this board. Virginia already has strict voting machine certification standards in place, and as I mentioned, we are in the process of requiring even more security standards for voting machines. So the law states that it cannot change the results. This audit will not change the results because it cannot be completed until after the board has certified the election. So I hope that answers some questions. I'm obviously going to be glad to take some questions afterward, but I want to make sure that I understand the concerns that are out there. And so one of the things that we've decided to do is, while we love this statewide audit, we certainly understand that the small sample still leaves some people out there with some questions. So what we've decided to do is at the next board meeting, we will bring to you a list of localities that have not participated in the pilots, the 35 that were already selected. They will not be listed in the next round, but we will bring a set of those localities remaining who will then be randomly selected by this board to conduct an audit this summer on the results in their locality. We feel that that can help give us another opportunity to continue to perform these audits and continue to improve the process. But more importantly, it's the transparency. It's the ability for us to show that these audits really are an opportunity for the Commonwealth to transparently show that we have conducted fair, free, secure, and accurate elections. And so I'm happy to take any questions on the myriad of things. I've never spoken this long for a commissioner's report, so congratulations for that. But happy to take any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Piper. First of all, I'd like to second your remarks about the good fortune of Secretary Johnson being elevated to that position and your loss, but the Secretary of Administration's gain in Jessica Bowman moving up the hill. They're both outstanding people. I've worked with both of them in a number of different guises over the years, and the Commonwealth will be benefited by their service. Do any of the members have additional questions for Commissioner Piper?
Mr. Chairman, I have a procedural question and then some questions. Is it anticipated that the commissioner will be able to address some of the questions from our citizens on this issue at this point? Or at this part of the agenda, I guess is the question.
I think that procedurally, this won't be a point for open comment. Rather, that'll come during the general public comment period at the end.
All right, thank you. I do have a couple of questions for the commissioner. You mentioned the director of operations position. And my recollection of that from the JLARC report that it was kind of an apolitical, nuts and bolts run things. So can you tell me how you're going to pick this person and who's going to do the interviews and how you're going to assure that?
Yes, so this is 100% a classified full-time position with state government. The process is going to be followed very strictly by DHRM, the Department of Human Resource Management procedures, and so it will be apolitical in all that respect, just like any other position we would hire in this agency.
Thank you. And I also ask that we share the February 4th letter from some of our General Assembly folks with the other members of the board. And you may have spoken to this, Chris, but there's concern in this letter about 24.2671 and whether your audit, and you made the point about the machines, but apparently the code suggests that the machines should be checked as well. Can you address that?
Well, so I think that this is about communication, right? So the fact of the matter is that because we use paper ballots, we can go back and look at those paper ballots and conduct this audit, which is a random sample of the ballots to determine that the results were as reported. If you go back, I mentioned like it's a hard thing to say because I hate saying the word hacked, but it's really the best word to use. But if somebody hacks a voting machine to the point where it is going to spit out incorrect results, if we were to run the ballots back through the machine after the election, we'd get those same results, but we wouldn't know anything more about the machine. What's great about an audit is we can take a random sampling of those ballots, we can review them, and we can, through a statistical method, determine that the ballots, that the machines counted correctly at the end of the day. It's very similar to how we do, pre-election polling, which I know people aren't excited about pre-election polling right now, but I will say that this is way more scientific in the sense that you're pulling the actual ballots that were marked by the individuals. So reviewing the machines is done prior to the election when we do the logic and accuracy testing and ensure that the machines are working as designed. And then the post-election is to review the ballots themselves.
Thank you. Just one more brief comment and question. We're going to do the post-election report, and you'll see that in 2018, the biggest complaint we had was long lines. This year, the biggest complaint was election integrity. And we now have, whichever side you're on, we have a great opportunity to build back some trust in the system because we had so many changes coming into this. So I guess I'm just curious why we would not have chosen to maybe at least audit one congressional race that was close. You made the point about numbers, but I think you would go a long way to making our public feel a lot safer if we went on and did something a little closer than taking an election that had a wide margin. So I'll just make that comment. If you want to respond, fine.
I would love the opportunity to respond. And so, as I pointed out at the beginning, the whole point of the statewide audit was because it brings in all 133 localities to expose them to the process. I mean, up until this point, it was only 35 localities in Virginia that had participated in the process. And this was a really unique opportunity to do a statewide audit that exposed everybody to the process without, having to pull thousands and thousands of ballots because of the wide margin. Now, that said, I hear what your concern is, and I've heard the concerns from others. And certainly, and I'll talk about this in the post-election report. My concern is ensuring that we provide as much transparency and as much checks on what we're doing as possible. So that's why we determined that we're going to go back to and discuss a little bit more exactly how we want to do this, but we'll be bringing back some more audits for you all to review over the next several months. But we're going to continue to do audits, and again, the statewide audit was to expose the entire Commonwealth to the opportunity and to the process.
I'll be waiting expectantly to see what you bring, because I'd love to see the 7th audited.
We will note that for you, Mr. Vice Chair. Thank you.
Well, Dr. O'Bannon, is what you're suggesting similar to a hand recount?
I'm not an expert in that, Bob, but if we have the process, could you not apply it to a congressional district and do a risk limiting audit of that set of voters and have benefit of that transparency, as the commissioner said, and and understand about not putting the whole state through it, but at least I think that would go a long way to reassuring the public that we're where we say we are. Anyway, thank you.
Understand. Any additional comments or questions?
I did want to ask a question just because someone has typed it into the chat. Ms. Getz is a proponent of one method, but I wanted to ask about the ballot polling versus ballot level comparison.
So, and without getting into a very long discussion that I probably am not equipped to bring up today, but what I will say is that in Virginia, we have done several of these pilots, and what we have found is that given our system and the current setup that we have, actually the most efficient and the best way for us to complete an audit with full assurance that we're meeting that risk limit is with ballot polling. But we're continuing to review, and I can say, while post-election audits are growing, and we're doing great work with them across the country now, it's still up for a lot of evolution, I would say. And so we're going to continue to look at our options, and there could be, we just want to continue to improve in the process. So, but as it stands right now, ballot polling is the best option for Virginia.
Okay, any additional comments or questions? If not, the next item of business that we have is the post-election report from the November 3rd, 2020 general and special election, which has been alluded to earlier. Commissioner Piper, do you want to walk us through this 46-page compendium?
I'm very happy to do so, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. There's a lot to cover here as well. I'm glad I have my water bottle close by. We'll have a lot of speaking to do, but I wanted to note, as I'm reviewing the contents of this report, when I refer to a page number, I'll be referring to the page number of the actual report not the number in the board book. So it's the number in the center. So you'll see page 4 of 46, for example. I just didn't want you to be looking at the board books numbers, focusing on that way the public can follow along as well. Okay. So first of all, I want to particularly thank Dave Nichols, our manager of election services. He really did the heavy lifting on this and directing the production of this post-election report. Also, his election administration team for conducting a lot of the research and putting together a lot of the information, as well as our data team and the information services division. They have worked very hard. The graphs that you saw and all that information was put together by them. So I want to call them out and thank them very much for their hard work. I'd also like to thank the general registrars, the electoral board members, and the entire Department of Elections staff, as well as you, the members of the State Board of Elections, for your support. I'd also like to thank the governor's administration for their support in ensuring the success of our 2020 election. This had to have been the most difficult year in American history, certainly that I've ever seen, and certainly the hardest election I've ever worked in my entire life. But it was a real tribute to the Commonwealth and to the department, to you all, especially the general registrars, for their amazing hard work in this past year's election. So starting out on page 4, I want to highlight and state with my firmest belief that Virginia election officials conducted the most safe, secure, and successful election in the history of the Commonwealth on November 3rd, 2020. I believe that with all of my heart, and I would like to say that that is even more amazing when you think about the environment in which it was conducted. This was not just true in the Commonwealth, but it was true all over the country. In the midst of unprecedented odds, a record number of voters showed up and cast their ballots. As the election report says, we owe a great debt of gratitude to our election officials in the Commonwealth and across the nation. Many sacrificed their health and time with their families to ensure that democracy was carried out. I, for one, am overwhelmed with the dedication that I saw, and I saw them, the dedication I saw for them to uphold our most fundamental right as Americans. It's important to note that the people who run your elections are your friends, your neighbors, perhaps your family. If not, they are mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters, sons, daughters, husbands, and wives. And while they may hold political beliefs, those are left outside when they walk in the doors and swear to uphold their oaths to administer fair and free elections. The point of this post-election report is to open the doors, draw back the curtain, and perform an honest assessment of the election here in Virginia. It's an opportunity to celebrate our successes, acknowledge our shortcomings, and start the conversation for how we can continue to improve the administration of elections in Virginia. So starting with page 5, looking at the various bills, I'm not going to go into detail, but we're all aware that the biggest change actually came before the pandemic hit, and that was expanding no excuse absentee voting for the entire 45-day period. It's the first year in which absentee voting did not require excuse in Virginia. And then later, as the pandemic rolled on, the General Assembly met in a special session and passed legislation allowing for a cure process for absentee ballots, prepaid postage, and creating drop-off locations. If you move to page 7, you'll see what you all did, the State Board of Elections regulations. Many of these were passed in an effort to meet absentee by mail best practices, including the intelligent mail barcode requirement, allowing for the tracking of ballots through the mail, requiring the election mail insignia on absentee ballots to ensure that the post office would recognize ballots as election mail and prioritize them. You also passed a regulation on missing or illegible postmarks. Starting on page 8. I have now the record for the most lawsuits as the agency head here. So, and poor Carol Lewis, she came on just about a year before the November 2020 election. She's probably handled more lawsuits than any previous attorney who worked at the Attorney General's office when it comes to elections. So it was really just an unprecedented number of lawsuits that were filed during this year. And the big ones, I think we had many that were covering the number of petition signatures required. Several worked to reduce those signatures requirements. The other one was a witness signature requirement. This was to remove the requirement for witness signatures on the absentee ballot. We also had a lawsuit regarding print disabled individuals, and this was under current law. The only individuals who could receive an emailed ballot were those uniformed and overseas citizens or certain UACAVA citizens. This lawsuit sought to expand that because those who had visual impairments or print disabilities were not able to vote in a private and independent manner without sacrificing their health. And then we also had a lawsuit related to the outage of our registration website on the registration deadline, which I'll talk about in just a minute. Moving on, if we go to page 12, I want to highlight some of the things in our data that we brought up in this year's election. First of all, new voters. I want to just highlight on page 12 and the new registrations between 2016 and 2018. I'm sorry, 2020. The fact of the matter is that we nearly met the number of new registrations in 2020 as we did in 2016. That in the midst of DMV closures, DMV office closures, as well as the inability for groups to gather and do their normal voter registration drives as they did in 2016 because of the pandemic. This is just a highlight of how the Department of Elections over the last 4 years has really provided a lot more options in registration methods and made it easier for folks to register along the way. And then another thing that I'm pretty excited about, just as an election nerd, to be honest with you, is if you look at that other graph, in 2020, nearly 78% of voters who registered to vote did end up voting in the 2020 election. And so if you compare that with 2019, we only had about 18%. All right. Moving on to page 14, point out that we had record high turnout. The most voters ever voted in Virginia in 2020, 4.4 million. What's more impressive of that is that 2.6 million voted early, either in person or by mail. And as you can see, when you go to the next page, in 2020, that's a huge change from previous years as a percentage of the turnout for early voting and absentee voting. So essentially 2.6 million voted early, either by mail or in person. And then we had 1.8 million vote in person on election day. That is huge, especially because in 2016, we had just about 4 million turnout, 4 million turnout to vote in person on election day. To see that change, especially in the midst of a pandemic, is pretty remarkable. So moving on to page, that was it, huh? Yeah. as far as data is concerned, I wanted to highlight those mostly for our data action. So moving on to page 29 and talking about specific issues that we saw. Oh no, I'm sorry, on data, page 29, LNA testing. So one of the things that we do in this post-election report is we ensure that we're tracking how information is coming into us from an election administration standpoint to highlight where we need to improve in our communications. So as I mentioned earlier, the State Board of Elections passed a requirement for logic and accuracy testing, and for each locality to not only perform it, but to submit a certification that the LNA testing had been completed. And so we were close to 100%, but there were 5 localities that did not certify to us. So this highlights to us that we really need to focus in on this area. It is obviously a very important area for us in ensuring the integrity of the election. Those localities did actually perform their LNA testing. It's just that we didn't get the certification. So we're working on our communications there to ensure that we improve that. The other one is the page 30. Right before an election or in the days prior to an election, we ask that localities go and look at our election night reporting website to ensure that all precincts are available or showing that everything is verified for election night. And we had compliance from 116 localities and non-compliance from 17. This causes issues because obviously we want to ensure that election night results are accurate, and that we want to avoid any last-minute changes. Last-minute changes to the election night reporting page have in the past resulted in issues with the information being displayed. And so we want to make sure that we're really capturing and getting everybody to verify their ENR information. And so that's an area that we wanted to highlight for ourselves to improve. While it didn't cause any issues this year, we don't want it to cause any issues in the future. Moving on to page 35. This is the kind of the point of these election administration functions and what we talk about in those previous couple of data points. This is an opportunity for us to track these issues and build future training around these. So that's one of the things we're doing is we look where we weren't as successful as we would have liked, and we're going to improve our training and communications procedures around there. Moving on to specific issues related to the election. Obviously, if we go to page 36, we've talked a little bit about it already, COVID-19. We did utilize CARES Act funding to provide PPE for localities. And one of the things I'm most proud of is our collaboration, our cross-agency collaboration with the Medical Reserve Corps, which is a function of the Virginia Department of Health. The Medical Reserve Corps went into numerous localities. They received training on elections. They worked and monitored early voting locations. They trained poll workers in infection control and provided consultation at polling places on election day. This was a unique partnership that was actually modeled around the country after we set it up to ensure the health and safety of those voters who chose to vote in person. It was a great collaboration, and I'm excited to hopefully continue that collaboration as we move forward. As I mentioned earlier, unfortunately, it's just the luck of the draw and another moment of 2020, but randomly on the last day of the voting registration deadline, a fiber optic cable that was critical to the operations in the Virginia Election Information Technology Agency, was cut. This actually led to outages for us and the DMV, which made it impossible for a good majority of the day for anybody to register to vote online. This is obviously out of all of our control, but kudos to VITA and to the team for communicating the issues. It did come back up online at 4 p.m. And we worked together with several groups to have the courts extend the voter registration deadline to ensure that nobody was disenfranchised as a result of this unfortunate circumstance. So this is the one part that's hard for me to talk about, but in the interest of transparency, I am aware that, the election night reporting, we worked very hard on this issue, but we, at the end of the day, we realized that the plan that we put in place presented some unforeseen issues with public perception. I'll give you a quick 1-2 on this, so I don't spend a lot of time on it. But we understood a couple of things going into this election. Absentee votes were allowed to be received up until Friday after the election. That was a law passed prior to the pandemic. You all worked on some regulations surrounding that. And so we had this issue where we had to provide some election night results. Absentee voting is kind of all lumped together. So early voting, all the people who voted early in person, along with those absentee ballots that came in, are all reported in the central absentee precinct. We understood that we had, that we were going to have a large number of people voting early and voting absentee by mail. So all of those votes would be contained in that central absentee precinct. We also had the added issue of additional ballots coming in after the election night. And so we came up with a plan. It's detailed in here. But we also spent many weeks meeting with the campaigns and the parties. We also met with media, had a media briefing. On election day, we had several media briefings, and one in which where we described exactly how the votes were going to be reported on election night. But we understand that what ended up happening was exactly what we anticipated happening. The election day votes were going to be reported as normal. And then at 11 o'clock, we had asked the registrars to cease processing absentee ballots and report all of their early voting and absentee ballots received to that point. Understanding that there would be additional ballots that would be coming in the days later. What this ended up showing was a large number of votes from election day, and then later that evening we got the large number of votes from the early and absentee voting. Obviously, that provided, as I mentioned, unforeseen issues with public perception. It's an area that we're aware of, that we are working to address going forward, and we intend to really focus in that area over the next several months. On to the and see improvements in 2021. On to some of the successes. A lot of concern over the summer about the United States Postal Service. I can say, as I did prior to the November 2020 election, the United States Postal Service and the collaboration with our office was top-notch. We met at least bi-weekly, and then as we got closer to the election, we met weekly to ensure that any issues with ballots or election mail was handled, and we feel that we had great collaboration there. We solved a lot of problems in those meetings and ended up with what I think was a very strong partnership, ensuring that those ballots that were mailed did get to the offices on time. Secondly, we implemented, as a result of the state board's regulation, the ballot tracking. So we had the intelligent mail barcode, and then we put up what's called Ballot Scout, so you could track your ballot through the system. And while we feel like we had a general overall success in that area, there were issues with the United States Postal Service not scanning the ballots. So if you and I'll just, even in my example, I was able to track my ballot from the time that it left the general registrar's office all the way till right before it got to the general registrar's office. But I had to actually go physically into the citizen portal to see that the general registrar had actually processed my ballot. And so we've been working with Ballot Scouts since then, as well as the United States Postal Service, and we're going to see upgrades in that area, and we'll see more consistent tracking across the board to avoid some of the confusion we saw there. Moving down a little bit lower on page 38, our public information and media campaign. I'm very proud of the Defending Democracy ad that was out there. I think I showed it to you all at a board meeting over the summer. And then we also put our Free to Be absentee campaign on social media and had a lot of positive responses there. Proud of that. We are going to continue to work in that area to promote voter education and integrity. All right, so moving on to some other specific issues with that we saw throughout the year. Looking at, again, page 38, you see that we reported some issues with New Kent. New Kent's, as I mentioned here, New Kent County did not utilize a machine at their central absentee precinct. So voters would come in, they would cast a ballot, and they'd put it in an absentee envelope. And then the electoral board, the general registrar, processed through those ballots through the machine at a later date. There was a lot of miscommunication and confusion on that issue. We highlighted it there. You saw that we had to have a special meeting to recertify the election results due to some issues with the certification in Hopewell and Prince William County. We highlight City of Richmond as well in here, and some of the issues that were related to that, especially with regard to a FOIA. And then highlighted the long lines in Fairfax County and the City of Virginia Beach. I understand that they have worked to rectify those, and I think we'll see improvements in those areas. But what I can say is the reports from people when they go early to vote, they're okay with standing in those longer lines. We didn't have a lot of issues with that. Some complaints, but not nearly as much as we would as a long line and on election day. Some other issues to highlight: the multiple ballots. We point out that there are a few localities with reports of sending more than one ballot to single voters. There are protections in place. While that was an unfortunate error, one thing we know for sure is that an individual can only submit one ballot. This process is set up to ensure that nobody could submit more than one ballot. So that was easily rectified. Unfortunate that it happened, but we have worked to address that as well. So we have some summary and suggested best practices on page 41. But I think the overall consensus, as I said, was that this was an incredibly successful election. And my final statements on the matter, and I'm happy to take some questions, is that I believe strongly in transparency, and only by being open and transparent can we restore faith in those who have questions about the integrity of our elections. And while I can say with the utmost confidence that we conducted a secure, free, and fair election, words are not enough. So as long as I am commissioner, it will be my duty to come in every day working to ensure that our elections are free and fair, and to show the voters that they can trust our elections. I'm going to leave with one final reminder. We are here to answer questions and allay concerns. We encourage anyone who is concerned about the process to send us your questions. We will be happy to answer them. Again, thank you to the thousands and thousands of people across the Commonwealth who made this year's election a success. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I welcome the board's questions.
Thank you, Commissioner Piper. I just want to say that considering the number of changes and the number of challenges that the election system faced this year. The statistics on page 12 and page 13 are just astounding to me. The fact that we had registrations, new registrations this year that almost equaled 2016 in light of the inability of third parties to conduct registration drives, as well as the closure of DMV for much of the registration period is astounding to me. And then on page 13, the fact that that we had that number of registrations, 426,000 compared to 431,000 4 years ago, is something. And the other statistic that caught my attention is the turnout figures. In light of the pandemic, in light of the conditions under which this election had to be held, the local elections operations, the registrars and directors of elections, as well as the electoral boards, and all of the election workers did an astounding job. So we actually had more people voting in 2020 than we did in 2016. What I'm interested in is seeing whether these statistics hold up going forward. But for now, looking back on 2020, I think that all of the citizens of the Commonwealth owe a tremendous debt of gratitude, both to the local elections workers and to the staff of the department there in Richmond. Dr. O'Bannon, Secretary LaCruz, did you have any questions?
I guess I have the same question I did before. Are we going to have public input at this point? Because if so, I'll just, some of my questions may get answered in the public comment.
Right. After we take questions from the board, we'll go into public comment.
Well, then I'll go ahead. So, Chris, thank you. I appreciate the report. I am impressed by the very last set of words that you had at the end of that about transparency. And I will say it was really fascinating to, Bob alluded to this, we had a changing landscape. I mean, we had bills, and then we had budget amendment bills, and then we had the grassroots, the electoral boards and the registrars with lots of questions, and then you all trying to put out guidance and sort of things changing as they went along. But I guess, where do we go from here on CAP? Looking for more specifics on how we solve that big problem of how we report things at the end, and how you're going to get the input from the EBs and the GRs and put that all together. And I'm not dissing the bullet points on 41, but they're kind of general. And so I'm kind of hoping to get a little bit of more specifics on what your plan is going forward.
That's a good question, and thank you, Vice Chair. Again, the point of the post-election report is to start the conversation. And of course, we're already 3 months past the election, so starting the conversation, we're in the midst of it. So, the General Assembly has proposed legislation and working its way through that process that is looking to address these issues. I think that the biggest thing is specifically refining the process on the back end of what we do, providing the guidance in a little bit differently. So, I mean, what happened was, I think a big piece of what happened was early voting and absentee voting were all in one bucket. And so what we ended up with is a lot of votes cast prior. I mean, we had 1.8 million votes cast before we even got to election day. And those weren't reported until later in the evening for the most part, especially in your larger localities where the most votes were cast, you know, relatively speaking. So working in that area to address that, refining the process on pre-processing. So pre-processing is running absentee ballots by the mail through the system, through the ballot counters, and going through that process, refining that, making it more uniform across the Commonwealth. There's some specific areas that we're looking to address. The good news is that we work very, very closely with the general registrars and the electoral boards, work groups that we gather together to address these issues. So I think, while I'm still speaking somewhat generally, and I apologize, I think that the important thing is that we get the door open. We talk about how it wasn't. I mean, being able to talk about what we didn't do right so that we can address it, I think, is the first step. Now we're going to boil down to the specifics with those folks who are actually on the ground handling the ballots on during the election. So we've got some areas that we're addressing it, and I think you'll see some specific changes and positive changes going forward.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. On the election night reporting, election night through Canvas reporting section of your report, as I recall, there were stories and the department also put out the word going all the way back into the summer about the sequence of reporting on election night and following. But you know, and as I said, there were a number of media stories as well. Now we're kind of high information, and we were looking for information like that. But I think that one aspect going forward will be that as part of your communications campaign, you may want to look at educating the voters about what the sequence will be, depending on what the lay of the land is going forward into the next general election. Secretary LaCruz?
So, yeah.
Okay.
No, I would concur with that, because I think a lot of the kind of outrage or complaints that we received were just because, you know, a lot of the public just wasn't aware procedurally what was going to happen. So that could easily be remedied next time.
Okay, any additional comments or questions from the members? If not, could the staff let us know whether individuals have signed up to comment?
Hi, Chairman Brink. First up, we have Mr. Chris Martson. He's the General Counsel of the Republican Party of Virginia.
Okay, hello, Mr. Marston. Welcome, and just to remind you that you'll be recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you specifically for extending an invitation to the Commissioner to provide comments on this particular portion of the meeting. I very much appreciate your interest and feedback from the party. I also want to ensure at the outset that I share the Commissioner's sentiment that we owe a great debt of gratitude to the many election officials that worked under very difficult circumstances to ensure that we could carry out our election. I've also taken the liberty of providing some written comments, lest you be limited to just 3 minutes of my wisdom. So I sent those to the Secretary and the department's email address, so I hope you'll be able to review those at your convenience. I would like to highlight just a few items, comments. I too appreciate the Commissioner's commitment to openness and transparency, but I have to take exception to the introduction to the report in which the department has declared this to be the safest, most secure, most successful election in the history of the Commonwealth. For all I know, that could be true, but there's not an objective criteria by which we can measure those things. And there's no data to compare this in specific ways to past elections on security. Should we do a recount of the Madison Monroe 1789 congressional contest to see if our 200-year history had any safer elections? So I kid to some extent, but I'm concerned because, for example, in debates in the General Assembly, members quoted that one line from this report to declare that all of the election changes in law they made last year were clearly the right thing because this was the most successful, secure, and safe election in the history of the Commonwealth. And I just don't think that it's appropriate for the department to make that declaration when it can only control certain factors that affect any election. It can't control what the General Assembly does. It certainly can't control pandemics. I laud the department and the many localities for doing a lot of great things this year, but I think that that kind of conclusory superlative is just not appropriate for a report of this kind. Nevertheless, in my written comments, I extend a number of compliments that I really mean to the department and the board for some great initiatives they undertook. I do, because of the limits of time, want to highlight some things where I hope the department and the board might take the opportunity to improve. This year, you were required to do a number of regulations, some at your own instance, some as a result of the General Assembly's actions. I'm concerned that the regulatory activity didn't start until well after the laws went into effect in July, despite that we knew what they were in April when the governor signed them, and that the regulatory process took quite a long time before the regulations were finalized. We were in the unfortunate position of having to file a lawsuit over our belief that one of the regulations didn't properly interpret the statute, but we couldn't do it until October because the regulations weren't final. So I would encourage the board to start the regulatory process early and consider using some of the authorities the board has with regard to negotiated rulemaking to involve stakeholders earlier in the regulatory process. With regard to the statistical analysis section, I'm very glad that you've provided statistics on so many different aspects of the election process, but I'm particularly concerned about the votes cast portion of the record of the statistics you present. The numbers there are not. Yes. Have I already hit 3 minutes?
I'm afraid so.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity to comment.
Is this included in your written comments?
It is, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Very good. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, when will we get benefit of these written comments?
I'm sorry?
When will the other members of the board get benefit of these comments?
Mr. Vice Chair, Mr. Chairman, if I might. I hadn't seen them yet, but if he sent them to our main inbox, then I will request that now and get that over to you ASAP.
Thank you.
Okay. Next speaker.
We have Susan Swecker.
Ms. Swecker.
Good afternoon. I am the chairman of the Democratic Party of Virginia. Thank you for allowing me to speak today. Pulling off a safe and secure 2020 election, which it was, took hard work, commitment, and thorough planning. We worked closely with election administrators across Virginia to help make this a smooth and accessible process, with one exception. Here in the capital city, we saw repeated mistakes and mismanagement. Registrar Kirk Showalter failed repeatedly to adapt to legal requirements. She is the only registrar we had to sue to get information that we were lawfully entitled to. She recklessly disregarded the COVID protocols put in place, putting her staff and citizens in danger more than once. Ms. Showalter failed to follow the law regarding absentee ballots. She refused to pre-process ballots, waiting until the last minute. This made absentee cure even harder. Further, she initially claimed that they had no ballots requiring cure. Later, it was revealed that there were, and those voters were not contacted within the statutorily required time frame. She further damaged the integrity of the office by providing knowingly false information to a FOIA request. This action led us, the Democratic Party of Virginia, to file a lawsuit, the only registrar in 6 years of me being chair that I have ever had to sue. While settled, Richmond was the only locality to have supervision mandated by the State Board of Elections. She failed to provide the public with accurate results of the election in a timely manner, and on 2 occasions, city council candidates were treated disrespectfully for simply asking for clarity on their results. Weeks after the election had concluded and been certified, there were still discrepancies between Richmond City and the state website on vote totals. Now, some have criticized the Democratic Party's call for Ms. Showalter to resign or be terminated, even going as far as to say, leave the donkeys and the elephants at the door. Let me make this clear. We work with registrars every day, and we don't know their political viewpoint. They're just good public servants. And we have found them, particularly in this challenging year, to be incredibly helpful, accessible, and strong partners in making sure voters had good, reliable information in a safe and accessible manner. Overall, this election went smoothly. And on behalf of the Democratic Party of Virginia, I commend all of you all that were involved. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Swecker. Our next speaker.
We have the Honorable Nancy Rodriguez.
Mr. Chair, members of the State Board of Elections, I appreciate this opportunity to share with you key points from my 5-page report that I submitted to you on my time while serving as an observer at the City of Richmond General Registrar's Office from Sunday, November 1 to the end of the Election Day activities. On the absentee ballot observation, by decision of the General Registrar, the processing of absentee ballots received by mail had to wait until Sunday before the election, November 1st, to be processed. This processing delay resulted in a backlog of 20,702 ballots. While my report goes into great detail on the problems, I want to give you one quick illustration of the disorganization. The time it took to unfold the ballots to place in the voting machine was not considered in the planning stage. By 6 p.m. on Sunday, I pointed out that it would take 56 to 57 hours of labor just to unfold the remaining ballots. This observation did cause management to bring in additional resources for Monday's workload. A problem on election day occurred when the Code of Virginia, which allows for the counting of handwritten ballots to begin at 3 p.m., was not followed. The General Registrar was not ready with instructions for the counters until 4 p.m. By 8 p.m., the team was exhausted and the counting halted. No additional staff was available to step in. COVID outbreak, which I must confess is personal since I contracted COVID as a result of my time in the General Registrar's office. Despite lip service being done to the need to socially distance, wear a mask, wash hands, there was little evidence of management enforcing the COVID requirements. One illustration is Election Day, where the desks that election officers worked on Monday had not been wiped down along with rulers and pens. Despite a mass order, I repeatedly saw members of management, including the General Registrar, without their masks, with each other and with other lower level staff in their offices not wearing masks. In conclusion, the recent General Assembly changes and COVID should have prompted every General Registrar to rethink their business processes. This clearly did not happen in the city of Richmond. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Secretary Rodriguez. Our next speaker.
That's all for now.
That's all for now.
Yes, sir.
Very good. In that event,
Mr. Chairman,
Dr. O'Bannon. I can't hear you.
I'm sorry. Nancy, how did you get to the General Registrar's office? Were you asked to do that, or?
Yes, I was, and I made sure as the background section of the report will explain, I had the blessing of the General Registrar of the I spoke with the commissioner, I spoke with the chair. I made sure everyone was willing to have me there as an observer.
You spoke with the chair, meaning Chairman Brink?
That is correct. As well as alerting, I just want to make sure that no one had a problem, including the General Registrar and the Electoral Board members.
Thank you.
All right, our next item of business is consideration of amendments to 1 VAC 20-70-20. Mr. Davenport?
Yes, good afternoon, Chairman Brink and members of the board. Are you able to hear me?
I am.
All right, excellent. Thank you. Today, ELECT is recommending that the State Board adopt further amendments to Regulation 1 VAC 20-70-20, which concerns absentee ballots returned by the absentee deadline, but with missing or illegible postmarks. We are requesting these amendments to comply with a consent decree that was signed on January 13th, 2021. The consent decree was formed between the Department of Elections through the Attorney General and plaintiff Thomas P. Reed, and the decree was signed and ordered by the Circuit Court of Frederick County. As a refresher for the board, you first approved this regulatory action regarding ballots with missing or illegible postmarks at the August 4th, 2020 meeting. The board adopted amendments to that regulatory action at a subsequent meeting held on October 20th, 2020, and now the board has for consideration the terms of the January 13th, 2021 consent decree. You will see the proposed amendments to the regulations text included in the board working papers. These amendments will help to guarantee that only ballots submitted by the close of polls are counted. However, they will also ensure that voters will not have their ballots rejected due to courier errors that are not the voters' fault. With that said, I will briefly summarize the effect of those proposed amendments. We also have Attorney General Carol Lewis on the line if she needs to additionally clarify the effect of those amendments. So I'm going to break it down first by how the amendments would affect ballots that are returned with missing postmarks. For those ballots, as long as they are received by the deadline, the General Registrar would first look at the intelligent mail barcode data that the Commissioner referenced in the report. This is data stored in the ballot envelope's barcode about the dates and times the ballot was scanned by mail couriers. If the intelligent mail barcode data shows affirmatively that the ballot was mailed on or before Election Day, the ballot will be counted. If the ballot is missing a postmark and the intelligent mail barcode data does not show that the ballot was mailed on or before Election Day, the ballot would not be counted. Next, we're going to go over the process under the amendments for ballots with illegible postmarks. First, the General Registrar would look at that intelligent mail barcode data. If the data shows that the ballot was mailed on or before Election Day, the ballot would be counted. If there is evidence from the mail barcode that the ballot was mailed after the close of polls, obviously the ballot would not be counted. However, some ballots may not have sufficient data from their mail barcode to make that determination. For those ballots, if they're received by the deadline with an illegible postmark, the GR will use the date of the voter's signed oath on the B envelope as the date the ballot was mailed. And as a final point, I would like to draw the board's attention back to some survey data that was mentioned in the post-election report. After the November 2020 general elections, ELECT sent a survey to the General Registrar community concerning ballots returned with missing or illegible postmarks. The return data shows that a relatively small number of ballots fell under the umbrella of this regulatory action. Localities reported that only 194 ballots without postmarks were received by the deadline to return ballots. Localities reported that in total, only 36 ballots with illegible postmarks were received by the deadline to return ballots. For your own reference, you can see those numbers on page 16 of 46 of the post-election report. In order to comply with the terms of the January 13th, 2021 consent decree, I have provided a suggested motion for a board member to take in the board working papers. On that note, I will open the meeting to comment or question from members of the board.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Davenport. Ms. Lewis, I just wanted to verify that the regulation embodies the terms of the consent decree that we entered into in Read v. Elect.
Thank you, Chairman Brink. Yes, that is correct. It mirrors the language that we entered into the consent decree on, and that you all are required to do under court order.
Very good. Do the members of the board have additional comments or questions?
I have a motion.
Dr. O'Bannon, will you state your motion?
I move the board adopt the department's proposed amendments to the regulatory action above described.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that the board adopt the regulations. I should ask first if there is any member of the public who's signified that they wish to comment.
Chairman Brink, there's none at this time.
Very good. All right. It's been moved and seconded that the board adopt the proposed amendments. Will the secretary call the roll?
Chairman Brink,
I vote aye.
Vice Chair Dr. Bannon,
Aye.
Secretary LaCruz, aye.
The motion passes 3-0. The next item on our agenda is the proposed SBYA policy 2021-001 regarding stand by your ad hearings. Ms. Alexander, are you on the line?
I am, Chairman Brink. How are you today?
I'm fine.
Oh, wonderful. Well, good afternoon, Chairman Brink, Vice Chairman O'Bannon, and Secretary LaCruz. And congratulations to all of you who've stayed for the most exciting moment of the meeting, campaign finance. Today, we're going to focus on stand by your ads specifically. Presently, we're working under the policy adopted March 18, 2018. That policy was SBE Policy 2018-001, stand by your ad hearings. It was a good policy, but all good things can often be improved upon, and that's what we're hoping for today. Today, we have SBE Policy 2021-001, stand by your ad hearings, which is presently in draft form in your working papers. This new policy allows for better SBYA management internally at ELECT. We'll be setting 2 specific dates for SBYA hearings, so ELECT can immediately allow complainants to know when their complaint will be heard. It will allow a quick turnaround for the respondent to remediate any advertising issues brought to light by the complainant, or to get their defense into ELECT without that time crunch we're presently under with our notification methods. Everyone has more time with this plan under this new policy, and more time to set things straight before penalties stack up. A lot of stuff remains the same. The board will still be provided with all of the evidence for each alleged violation and all of the information pertaining to the committee that ELECT has available to it at the time of the presentation, with the addition of any SBYA policy or SBYA violations that the committee had previously been charged with. We'll still be giving everyone an opportunity to be heard on both the complainant and the respondent side. The changes are, we now have a dedicated SBYA email account, which now is a place where all SBYA can live and doesn't get confused and mingled with other campaign finance issues. We have definite dates set aside just for SBYA hearings. There will be no more of the, are we doing SBYA this month or not? We know they're going to happen in August and January now. We will have additional ways to contact respondents instead of the 2 ways that we have been using with email and certified letter. We're gonna go ahead and use all the aspects or all of the addresses that we have available to us. This way, the respondent has a better chance of getting their information to us and to be notified, because as we know, there's quite a time between each hearing. People move, they get PO boxes are closed down, offices are closed. This way we have a better chance of tracking down these people to get their notices. We'll also be giving more time to have a continuance in case they need it, they can't make it to the meeting. The big changes, as I've mentioned, will be 2 SBYA meetings a year. The respondent will be able to cross-examine to elicit a full and fair disclosure of the facts. Ms. Lewis from the Office of the Attorney General, she will have to explain the part about subpoenas, because I will tell you, I'm not good with that yet. And decisions can now be changed. Before, once you made a decision, that was it. So now there's a little extended information there. Ms. Lewis can add anything else to it, and if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Thank you, Ms. Alexander. Ms. Lewis, did you want to add any comments at this point?
Certainly. Just to add a little bit onto what Tammy very well explained. So now, in order to give candidates a little bit more of a robust chance to rebut any complaint that is brought against them, they will be able to request that any complainant appear before the board for cross-examination. Pursuant to the policy that is laid out in the working papers, the chair of the board is still able to tailor any sort of hearing to make sure that it is fair and efficient. And then with respect to the opinions that need to be offered, so the process as it's laid out in the working papers would be that the board hears the complaint and then is required to take it under consideration and then issue an opinion within a certain amount of time that is written, that lays out the board's determination and the factual findings that led them to come to that determination. I'm happy to take any other questions that the board might have.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Lewis. I just want to say that stand by your ad procedures have been a matter of concern to me and possibly to other members of the board for the past 2 years. And I think this revised policy it's a big step forward. It's much more clear about what the process should be, and it ensures that our proceedings will be consistent with the Administrative Procedures Act. Do the other members of the board have any questions or comments?
I just had a question, as Ms. Lewis described, the ability to bring the complainants to court for cross-examination to the hearing for cross-examination. Is that the intention, that the board members are going to be able to cross-examine the complainants, or is the candidate also going to be able to do that?
Thank you, Secretary LaCruz. Yes, so the complainant is also able to cross-examine the respondent. So the person against whom the complaint is brought is able to cross-examine. And of course, the board at any point in time can raise questions to further the hearing.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any additional questions or comments? Can staff tell us if there's any members of the public who wish to be heard?
We have no one for public comment, Chairman Brink.
Very good. In that event, I'll entertain a motion that the board adopt the proposed policy.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board adopt policy 2021-001. And I thank Ms. Alexander for stepping up and taking this under her.
It is noble of her. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Will the secretary call the roll, please?
Chairman Brink,
I vote aye.
Vice Chair Dr. O'Bannon,
Aye.
Secretary LaCruz, aye.
The motion passes 3-0. Can the staff tell us if there are any members of the public who want to be heard on a matter that's not on today's agenda?
Yes, Chairman Brink, I will call Elizabeth Butler.
Okay, Ms. Butler? Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Can you all hear me?
You can.
Wonderful. Thank you. I'm here today representing the Richmond City Republican Committee and our chairman, Hayden Fisher. I just wanted to notify you, members of the board, and Commissioner Piper of a pattern of improper actions that were taken by certain members of the Richmond City Electoral Board during and since the November 2020 election. I'm urging you to investigate these matters and to request the replacement of James Nachman and Joyce Smith with new electoral board members who will faithfully and impartially uphold their duties as electoral board members. And there are 3 other people on the call today that can explain some of the details of that in their public comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have someone else who's signed up?
Next up is Ames Russell.
Okay, Ames Russell? Is Ames Russell on mute? All right, in that event, can we go to the next?
Mr. Chairman, may I ask a question?
Certainly.
Yeah, are we still on the topic Ms. Butler brought up, or are you moving on to other issues?
I believe that the individuals who wish comment on the Richmond Electoral Board matter signed up together. So to that extent, we're still on the same topic.
Thank you.
We did,
Butler
Chairman
raised her
Brink,
hand.
and Ames Russell is on the line. He's trying to figure out how to unmute. It looks like he's unmuted now.
Okay, Ames Russell? Ms. Butler, do we have another speaker who could, or are you?
We do. The next speaker is Barbara Zedler.
I'm sorry?
The next speaker is Barbara Zedler.
Hello, this is Barbara Zedler. Can you hear me?
I can.
All right. I wish to comment on improper actions of the Richmond Electoral Board that occurred during the post-election canvass. By Virginia Code Section 24.2-671 and -107, the canvass occurs during an official meeting of the Electoral Board, which requires 2 members for quorum. However, parts of the 2020 canvass were not overseen by the Electoral Board, but by a single member. In addition, part of the canvass was conducted at Chairman Nachman's home without a duly constituted meeting of the board and without observers. Further details are provided in our letter to the board, including a statement by the single member of the board who was present for the beginning of the canvass, which began at 8 a.m. at the Richmond Registrar's office on November 4th. Until noon, that member was the only electoral board member present, despite calls for another member to show up. The second member and the chairman showed up between noon and 1 p.m. Chairman Nachman completed the canvass of results at his home on the evening of November 8th without a duly called member of the Electoral Board, without other members of the Electoral Board, and without observers. This apparently was attributed to the General Registrar's office being closed due to the outbreak of COVID-19 illness However, results of the canvass were not due to the Department of Elections until Tuesday, November 10th, and so the Electoral Board could have appealed to the Circuit Court on Monday, November 9th, for assistance, the appointment of a duly qualified stand-in substitute to complete the canvass in compliance with Virginia Code.
Thank you, Ms. Edler. Did you have any additional comments?
No, it's just that this full details are, as far as explanations to why this occurs as violation of the code, in a matter as serious as confirmation, review and confirmation of the results of the election are not fully available, and I think the Board of Elections needs to investigate this.
Thank you, Ms. Edler. Are there additional individuals who wish to be heard? Has Ames Butler or Ames Russell been unmuted yet?
I think he's still working on it. In the meantime, I have Starlet Stevens, who is a member of the Richmond Electoral Board. She's sitting here with me today.
Thank you. Ms. Stevens?
Thank you. Yes, my name is Starlet Stevens, and I am the Secretary of the Richmond Electoral Board. And I have sent the board and Commissioner Piper a long version of what happened around Election Day in 2020. I will give you a condensed version now. Starting with the canvass. The canvass for the election did start at 8 o'clock on Wednesday morning, as it always does. And I was the only board member present until 12 o'clock noon. As a general rule, Chairman Nachman never shows up through the canvass at the beginning of the morning. I did make repeated calls to Vice Chair Smith on Wednesday morning with no response. She finally showed up at 12 o'clock and stated that she and Chairman Nachman were there until 3:30 a.m. looking for missing tapes out of the number 2 envelopes. I told her at that point in time that that we should have had at least 2 board members there, one person representing the Republican Party and one person representing the Democratic Party. My participation in the canvass ended on Thursday, November 5th, due to being diagnosed with COVID-19, and I was very ill. I went home after my doctor visit and started to quarantine. On the evening of Sunday, November 8th, Chairman Nachman called me and advised me that he and his wife Kelly were checking all of the state results and tapes. I asked why he was doing this at his house, and he stated that the whole voter registration office was shut down and no one could enter the building. I said that this was a serious emergency and asked if someone at the state had been notified of our dire situation. I got no response from him. After talking with him further, I called Elizabeth Butler, who is on the Richmond City GOP committee, and advised her of the situation. She said that Democrats and Republicans needed to have someone contact a circuit court judge and have someone appointed to stand in for the sick board members. All 3 of us were sick. Elizabeth indicated that she had someone that could fill in for my position. I did call back Chairman Nachman and I advised him of this. He didn't feel it was necessary to take such measures. Elizabeth also contacted him the same evening, and he told her basically the same thing. The other situation that we have was the board meeting, closed session that happened on February the 1st, and this was the board meeting in which we were meeting with our registrar, Kirk Showalter. Chairman Nachman was verbally aggressive and disrespectful towards me. When I started to read the statement for us going into closed session, he stopped me and handed me another statement. I asked why he was doing this, and he said, just read it. I refused without knowing why he had changed the statement, took the paper away from me and gave it to Vice Chair Joyce Smith to read. Everyone but the board members, Ms. Showalter and her attorney Linda Woods, left the room. At that time, Nachman loudly shouted to Ms. Woods that
Ms.
she had.
Stevens, you've submitted these comments in writing, have you not?
Yes, sir, I have.
Very
To all
good.
three of you.
Okay. All right. So we've reached the end of your 3 minutes. Is Mr. Russell available?
If he's not available, he did send me a written statement, if you'll allow me to read it.
All right. After the electronic difficulties, that'll be fine.
Yeah, Chairman Brink, this is Dan Persico. It looks like he's connected, but there's no audio connection, and we have tried to chat him direct through WebEx to assist, but no response.
All right. So,
All right.
Ms. Butler, if you could read his statement.
Thank you. So in his words, I am a resident of the city of Richmond, chief election officer of precinct 115, and I've served as an officer for over 8 years. When we canvassed our precinct results the morning after the election, we found signed seals broken, crucial machine printouts of results missing, and another precinct material among ours. I later learned that electoral board members, Mr. Nachman and Ms. Smith, opened our sealed envelopes and removed our tapes in the middle of the night in violation of the Code of Virginia. Despite video evidence, Ms. Smith claimed the board didn't open those envelopes. We know not to do that. Kirk is using the board to cover herself. She does that to others as well to cover her mistakes. I contacted Registrar Showalter with this information, and she said, contrary to Ms. Smith's assertions, it was she and Mr. Nachman who opened those envelopes. I was not present at the time, nor were they opened at my direction. My questions, and this is Ames speaking, why did Mr. Nachman and Ms. Smith knowingly disregard code, and why did Ms. Smith flat out lie about their conduct and falsely blame Ms. Showalter? I feel this matter requires a thorough and impartial review to ensure the integrity of our electoral process and hold our officials accountable for their conduct.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Butler. I want to thank you and your colleagues for your comments, and we will take them under advisement to see what appropriate action should be taken.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Dr. O'Bannon?
Yeah, I do have a question for council on this issue, because this, I guess we have some responsibility here, and I'm curious from Ms., I know this was not part of the agenda, so we're not taking any action today, but I do want to ask Ms. Lewis, we had a somewhat similar situation with Hopewell, and what was the process we followed there, and where should we go from here?
Dr. O'Bannon, in the Hopewell situation, I believe the department had received complaints and independently tried to work with the individuals in question who were eventually removed from the board. And then those individuals were offered the opportunity to come before the board and explain their actions, and the board deliberated at that time whether to remove them from whether to petition the court to remove them from their positions.
So this is a question for the chairman. Should we not at least give this to the department and ask that they follow that same process going forward, Bob?
I think probably the next step to take is for us to go into executive session at some point to more fully understand what our authority and responsibilities are in this matter.
I have a question.
Dr. Bannon?
Yeah, so this wasn't even, it's just been presented. Do we need to do an executive session now, or do we just go ahead and take this on and have them come back, have the department look at it like we did with Hopewell, I guess, and come back to us? Is that right, Carol?
Yes, my advice at this point would be to have the department look at it and more fully gather any relevant information to present to you all if you would like at the next meeting, so that next steps can be taken if necessary.
So in that scenario, there might be an executive session at the next meeting.
Correct.
Then I would respectfully ask that we go that route.
That sounds good to me. And Ms. Lewis, that'd be the appropriate way to go?
Yes, Chairman.
All right. Then that's what we will do. Are there any additional members of the public who signed up to comment?
I don't know that they've signed up in advance, but there are two people in the chat who are indicating they wanted to speak. They've typed in here, Mr. Mills, as well as Ms. Getz.
Next. It will be John Mills next.
Okay, great, thank you. Can I proceed?
Please do.
Okay, yeah, all right. I just wanted to say thank you to Mr. Piper, who I don't see anymore, but I appreciate his work in the department. To the board members, I really appreciate your work. I know it's hard to do these duties, and no matter how well you do them, somebody will always find something that was not followed according to process and procedure. So I'm continuing that tradition here, but I've been in your seat and I do appreciate your hard work. And I've run elections. Not only have I been an election officer in the state of Virginia, I've also run or advised elections in Bosnia, Iraq, and Taiwan. So I kind of have a little understanding of different modicums of procedures here. I have submitted a letter which I think has 10 extremely important points that need to be addressed, and even actually should be addressed as part of the risk limiting audit. That letter has been delivered. I don't intend to go through every single point and deliberate at this point in time, but I think in the letter, in the spirit of the RLA, there's no reason there can't be an addendum or a supplement to address some of these matters. Some of these can be addressed relatively quickly and simply. And these are best practices. I really point to the Carter Center, which really is the gold standard for election integrity. We have a number of situations that essentially are in violation of the Carter Center guidelines on free and fair and ethical lawful elections. I'd like to point out just a few here. Unlawful registrations based on court data from Prince William County. This is a FOIA that I did. It points to very simple, 8% at a minimum are unlawfully registered. That court data was on those rejected for jury duty. And the jury rolls are pulled at that time. They were pulled from the voting records. So very simple. It's not debatable, not my opinion. It's actually 8% at a minimum. I'm being a little bit generous. I think it's higher than that. So that's important. This new super category of absentee votings with the flurry of registration, I would suggest has caused confusion. And actually there's dissimilar guidance on different registrars and county websites on this. I'm just going to call this new super category of absentee, but even in this meeting, I've heard multiple references to early voting, absentee, mail-in, drop-off, et cetera, lumped together. So I think we have a challenge here. We don't have proper classifications. One of them, another issue is ballots. There do not appear to be any control measures to ascertain whether a ballot return is actually a valid ballot that was sent out lawfully by the state. I think that's a challenge and a problem, and that violates basic best practices of the Carter Center in any form of election. Optical scanning is a very simple process. It could validate that. I heard folded. They need to be unfolded. Well, part of the RLA should be, are any ballots back not folded? How could they be not folded if they went out folded? So these are basic control measures that are very reasonable, and this is not insurmountable. The election machines themselves, I'm fairly familiar with the EAC. Yes.
You submitted written comments also, didn't you?
Yes.
Very
yeah.
good.
It goes through these 10 points in detail. I'm pretty familiar with the election machine security guidelines. The EAC essentially has one person, period, Jerome Lovato, who I would not make a big deal about the EAC guidelines.
Colonel Mills, you've reached the end of your 3 minutes.
Okay, I surrender the rest. Watch PBS Kill Chain if you want to understand how easy machines can be manipulated.
All right, thank you. Do we have any additional comments?
Yes, we have Ms. Jen Goetz.
Okay. Is this Ms. Getz? Apparently, we can't unmute. So if you could submit comments in writing, that would be preferable. Any additional comments?
Ms. Cheryl Driscoll.
Ms. Driscoll, are you with us? Ms. Driscoll says she's on the phone ending 2280. Ms. Driscoll?
Give me 1 second. I'm checking.
I believe she needs to hit *6.
Yeah, give me 1 second. I don't see that number ending in 80.
She just noted in the
Stated.
chat that
Okay.
she was joining right.
Okay.
Okay, Ms. Driscoll
Hi,
says.
this is Cheryl. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, sorry
Welcome.
about that. I got disconnected. Hi, thanks for your time. I've enjoyed listening to your meetings, the last one and this one. I am a Loudoun County resident, and I just want to give you some feedback about my experience with the RLAs this week. Judith Brown from Loudoun County has been fantastic. Today, I've been watching the RLAs in Loudoun County, which are via WebEx with 4 cameras, and it's been great. We've had 20 people watching. They just concluded. With Fairfax County, when I contacted Gary Scott, he simply said they're only going to be in person. And when I asked if they could do any WebEx because of COVID, he was just like, no. Also, it's not really on the website. What I've been doing is I had Taylor Denton tell me to go look on various websites. Loudoun County posted all the information about the RLAs, how you could see it, the WebEx, etc. I've looked at Winchester, I looked at Fairfax and other counties, and I'm not finding the RLA information on their election or government websites. So as a resident, I think it would be nice, since you all are overseeing the RLAs, if there was some centralized page where you listed all the localities, maybe with a link to the RLA information, or make sure that you require and validate that they have the RLA information on their government websites, because it's not out there.
Thank you, Ms. Driscoll. Any additional comments?
No, just that I thought Loudoun County did a great job today.
Okay, thank you. Has anyone else said that they wish to speak?
Ms. Getz?
Yeah, Ms. Getz, I'm going to unmute you. That should work.
I tried it. The request was sent.
Can you hear me now?
Is this Ms. Getz?
Yes.
Wonderful.
Okay, great. Sorry, somebody had to unmute me. Okay. Okay, so thank you all very much. This has been very informative, and I have greatly enjoyed watching and appreciate your all's dedication to this. I mean, the 2020 elections obviously posed a number of challenges, and I think it's fabulous that Virginia's moving in the direction of, auditing. In watching what was going on in Loudoun County this morning and getting ready to participate in Fairfax County's audit tomorrow, it doesn't really seem like this is a very effective method for verifying the outcome of the election. It's obviously very time and, cost involved with it also. And I'm just kind of curious if there's some other way that Virginia could better manage both of those resources to produce something that the public would have more confidence in. The polling versus, looking at a physical ballot, that just seems so simple to say, we're going to pull this box out and run it through the computer, and the computer's going to say this was the vote count, and then somebody's going to hand recount it, and those two things get compared, and either they match or they don't. Whereas the process that I watched this morning was taking pieces of paper and putting them on a scale to make sure they found the right ballot that some dice rolled to tell them which one to find, and then it gets sent to the state. It just seems very convoluted to achieve a goal that's very noble and should be pursued. So I'm just wondering if there's a better process that could be done that would make better use of all of our resources.
Thank you, Ms. Getz.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Commissioner.
Well, I appreciate the question, and I encourage you to continue watching the audits that you can, and we can continue this conversation, at another time after the meeting. But I want to just reiterate the point that I made at the top. A full audit, like a full-on audit, is a recount. It's and there's a reason that we only do recounts in the most, at the closest of races. Virginia law requires a recount, or allows for a recount that the state will pay for, if the margin of victory is within 0.5%. A big part of that reasoning for it is because it is expensive, it's time consuming, it's resource intensive. And so, the methods developed through these risk limiting audits allow us to check the election in a way that is less resources intensive. Now, if an election is really close, there are procedures in place for a full hand recount, or for a full recount. And so, but this is a check on the system, on the process, that we can do in a way that is much more efficient. And as I mentioned at the top, this is still a new process. We continue to refine and get better at it. We'll continue to improve upon it, and continue to, and legislation I'm sure will come about over the next several years, as we ramp up again for 2024. But the important thing is to do what you're doing, Ms. Getz, and attending these audits, learning from it. We are, as I stated to the registrars and the electoral board members at the kickoff, we are always willing and wanting to learn and wanting to improve the process. So your participation is appreciated throughout, and everybody's participation throughout the process is certainly appreciated by me and the staff, and I'm sure the registrar. So, but thank you for your comments.
Yes, I just want to second the commissioner's comments, Ms. Getz and Ms. Driscoll and the others who've commented on this process. Your input and your interest is very valuable. Do we have any additional individuals who wish to speak? If not,
Chairman Brank, we've been trying to work to get Ames connected, but I don't know if he's receiving our chats properly. We have reached out, but if you can hear me, sir, I will say that your best effort would be to call in and in the chat identify the last four of your phone number so we can unmute you.
we did have his comments read into the record by Ms. Butler, so he has been heard in a manner of speaking. All right.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do the members of the board have any additional comments?
Can I say one thing? If we're done with public comment?
I'm sorry, would you repeat?
Yes, are we done with public comment? Everybody from the public is finished? Great. Well, I want to bring it back around based on what just got said and something I was going to ask Chairman Brink anyway. But it's really interesting to watch the variation, say, between Loudon and Fairfax. And part of our challenge, which Commissioner Piper's tried very hard to do, is get uniformity. And so it's always difficult when you're dealing with localities to do that. But it goes back, Bob, to the advisory committee that you made official. And it has not been meeting because of COVID, but I'm kind of wondering if maybe that is worth revisiting since we now have these opportunities to look at what didn't go as well as it could have. And the last question was, has John Hager's spot on that been filled yet?
No, it is not. As I mentioned at the last meeting, the work group, after a period of dormancy because of the pandemic, is about to resume its work. As a matter of fact, Commissioner Piper and I spoke with the chair of the group, Lisa Gerchik, just yesterday. And what we're doing is we do need to fill the slot that was left vacant by the passing of John Hager. And he brought so much to the work group as an elected official, as a party official, and as a nonpartisan member of a local electoral board and the co-chair of the GREB group. So what we're doing is casting as wide a net as possible to find somebody who embodies his dedication to the electoral process. And if you have, or if any of the members, other members of the board have candidates who could fulfill those requirements, I'd be glad to share them with Commissioner Piper.
Thank you very much. I did have a conversation with the commissioner about some opportunities, and just historically, I understand that group worked well because it was balanced and it had input from both sides of the aisle, and John was kind of balanced against Kate Hanley. So I think if we continue that mindset going forward, and it doesn't have to be, not going to find many John Hagers, but if you can find people that are knowledgeable about the process and dedicated, I think it'll be helpful. And I'd be privileged to chat with, once we get 5 members, you and I can chat, but.
But until then, it's all through the commissioner.
All right, I just wanted to make those points.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you. Any additional comments or questions?
Mr. Chairman,
I'm sorry.
There was one additional public comment. I know public comment was over, so I just wanted to check if you wanted to allow additional public comment at this point, or if we could just ask them to send in their comments and we'll get them to the board, however you want to proceed.
I think for purposes of form, it would be preferable if the individual could send in written comments. If there is no other business to come before the board, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chairman, I want to compliment you. It is not easy to run a virtual meeting. And I have to say that I think you did a good job today, and I move to adjourn.
Thank you, Dr. O'Bannon. Is there a second?
Second and second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Will you, the secretary call the roll, please?
Chairman Brink.
I vote aye.
Vice Chair Dr. O'Bannon.
Aye.
Secretary LaCruz, aye.
All right, the motion passes 3-0. Thank you very much. And we have additional things on our plate for the next meeting, which I believe is in April. Thank you all very much.